Chapter 1777. My wife, please speak. Your husband is listening. Di Beichen pulled Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and sat down. He knew that Hongzhuang must have something very serious to tell him. Previously, when Hongzhuang had told him about her time travel, he was still very shocked. However, this did not change anything and he did not take it to heart. He had no idea what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang was in the past. He had never met her, much less liked her. When he first met Bailey Hongzhuang, she was already his wife's soul. Therefore, he had always loved his wife. There was no problem with that. Because of this, he naturally did not mind. On the contrary, he felt very fortunate. His wife had traveled through 1,000 years to find him. Beichen, actually, the reason why I had traveled through time was because of a divine weapon. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen's expression. When he heard the two words, divine weapon, Di Beichen's expression changed and was now filled with shock. Divine weapon? Di Beichen's deep eyes were filled with shock. Divine weapons existed only in legends and had heaven-defying abilities. In reality, even though he had heard of divine weapons, he had never seen one before. Come to think of it, even the various sects and clans do not have divine weapons. Yet now, his wife was telling him that she had traveled through time because of a divine weapon. Bailey Hongzhuang gently nodded, I've already dripped my blood on it and that divine weapon has merged into my body. Originally, she had always worn the chaos ring on her finger. However, the chaos ring was far too valuable and she had always been worried that she would lose it. Then, one day, after she had fallen asleep, the chaos ring had disappeared. At the time, she was shocked. Then, she realized that the chaos ring had merged with her and existed in her mind. She was relieved. This was, without a doubt, the best result. This way, she wouldn't have to worry about losing the chaos ring. Thinking back to when she first contracted with the chaos ring, she was still a little unaccustomed to all of this. As the time of the contract grew longer and longer, she and the chaos ring became more and more compatible. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's serious expression, Di Beichen knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking about how Di Beichen would react, Di Beichen's face suddenly became serious. His hands tightly grasped Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Wife, divine artifacts are treasures that only exist in legends. Since you were able to obtain it, it means that your destiny is extraordinary. You mustn't tell anyone about this. If someone with evil intentions hears about it, you might get yourself killed. Di Beichen's eyes could not hide his nervousness and worry. Any cultivator who possessed a treasure like this would definitely keep their mouths shut and not talk about it. Now, his wife had actually told him about this. It was fine if she told him, but if she told anyone else and this news spread, there would be no peace. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. This kind of thing happened quite frequently in the Xingxian continent. Therefore, no one who had obtained a treasure dared to make it public. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Di Beichen's nervous look, her heart could not help but fill with a thick warmth. She knew that Beichen was someone she could trust. Even a divine weapon as amazing as it was still unable to defeat the love between them. Chapter 1778. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was not alert at all and was instead smiling very happily, Di Beichen could not help but frown his good-looking eyebrows. Do you take what I said to heart? As the young sect master of Tiangang's sect, he had seen a lot of the world. Not to mention a divine weapon, even a better weapon would cause a fight. How could he not worry when he saw Hongzhuang's indifferent look? If the news of the divine weapon was spread, he was afraid that he could only take Hongzhuang and flee. After all, for such a treasure, he was afraid that the old fellows of various sects and families would have to come forward. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly hugged Di Beichen. Her face leaned on Di Beichen's chest, and the corners of her lips were filled with a happy and relieved smile. Beichen, I have never told this news to anyone. I just wanted to tell this news to you. Di Beichen, who was originally worried, stiffened slightly after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. In the next second, his eyes became increasingly gentle. Since his wife had not told this news to anyone for so long, it meant that his wife also knew the importance of this divine weapon. However, his wife chose to tell this news to him, which proved that his wife had extraordinary trust in him. This was tantamount to putting her life in his hands. His wife was gambling that the feelings between them were trustworthy. Di Beichen could not help but feel touched. If his wife lost the bet, then she would lose her life. It was enough to see how deep his wife's feelings for him were. He would not let his wife lose. Di Beichen hugged Bailey Hongzhuang with both hands. He only felt that their hearts were closer than before. Wife, what kind of life did you live before? Di Beichen looked curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. He was also curious about his wife's previous life. In the past, he thought that he knew Hongzhuang very well. Now, he realized that the life he knew before was not the real life of Hongzhuang at all. He wanted to know everything about Hongzhuang. In the past, he did not participate in Hongzhuang's life, but he could understand. As for the future, he would always be in Hongzhuang's life. I used to be the head of the Bailey family. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Now that there was someone who could listen to her talk about her previous life, she really felt very happy. This kind of thing had always been suppressed in her heart. She did not even have a person to share it with. After a long time, it was inevitable to feel a little depressed. If she told this news to others, they would think that she had gone crazy. Now that the person closest to her had come to listen to her, there was an indescribable satisfaction in her heart. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen understood that the Bailey family she was talking about was a real big family. At this moment, Di Beichen finally understood why Hongzhuang had such an intimidating aura. This kind of aura appearing on the younger generation was very shocking. Now that he knew that Hongzhuang was actually the head of an aristocratic family in her previous life, he also understood. As long as one was in power, their aura was far from what ordinary people could compare to. Even if Hongzhuang had transmigrated, her soul was still there, so her aura was still there. Beichen, is there no longer a Bailey family in the Xingxian continent? Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but raise her head to look at Di Beichen, her eyes flashing with hope. Chapter 1780. My dear wife, what's the use of the divine weapon that you've obtained? I've heard that divine weapons have always been extraordinary and their uses far exceed the expectations of ordinary people. Di Beichen's deep and enchanting eyes were filled with astonishment. He had never paid much attention to this kind of existence that only existed in legends. Most of the time, he even felt that it didn't exist at all. Now that Hongzhuang was clearly able to help him solve his doubts, he naturally wanted to know more about it. Seeing that Di Beichen had a rare look of confusion, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and explained. The use of the divine weapon is also very astonishing. Before I obtained the Chaos Ring, I had never thought that the divine weapon would have such an incredible use. Back then, after I had dripped my blood on the divine weapon to become its master, the divine weapon's power was simply too astonishing and caused an energy fluctuation. As a result, my physical body had turned into nothingness. If it weren't for the Chaos Ring, I wouldn't have been able to become Bailey Hongzhuang today. Since she had already told Di Beichen about the Chaos Ring, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't hide anything and immediately told Di Beichen everything about the Chaos Ring. The more Di Beichen listened to Bailey Hongzhuang, the more astonished he became. This was simply too astonishing. If it weren't for Hongzhuang's description, he wouldn't have been able to imagine it at all. You mean to say that Xiao He and Xiao Bai were originally the demonic beasts in the Chaos Ring? Di Beichen raised his voice and his handsome face was filled with astonishment. All this time, he had never understood what kind of demonic beasts Xiao He and Xiao Bai were. He had understood many demonic beasts and he even had some understanding of the beast kings. However, he really couldn't recognize existences like Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Yes, ever since I transmigrated, Xiao He and Xiao Bai have been accompanying me. Although the two little fellows were usually gluttons, they were still very concerned about her. Then, does the fact that you can contract 3 contracted beasts have something to do with the Chaos Ring? Di Beichen immediately thought of this possibility. Since Xiao He and Xiao Bai were both demonic beasts from the Chaos Ring, and they had both recognized Bailey Hongzhuang as their master, it was obvious that this had something to do with the Chaos Ring. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Di Beichen was really smart. She only said part of it, but Di Beichen had already guessed the latter part. So you learned your inscription technique in the Chaos Ring. I was wondering who you learned your inscription technique from. Di Beichen chuckled. He had always been amazed by Hongzhuang's talent in medicine, alchemy, and inscription techniques. However, he had never understood when Hongzhuang had learned them. As early as when he was in Feng Bo country, he had already known that Hongzhuang was skilled in medicine and alchemy. However, he had never heard Hongzhuang say that she knew inscription techniques. It hadn't been long since Hongzhuang had left for the Azure Water School and he had gone to find Hongzhuang. After that, he had always been by Hongzhuang's side. However, Hongzhuang had suddenly mastered the inscription technique, and she did not have any master by her side. This was too unbelievable. It wasn't until this moment that he completely understood. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. She thought that Beichen must be confused about her past changes. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang already knew who she was, Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with a touch of surprise. At the same time, she said with a smile, "Since I knew you, I have always wanted to meet you. I didn't expect to finally meet you today. I'm very happy that you can take in Di Beichen, this evildoer. In the future, Xiren and I don't have to worry about him being alone." When these words came out, Di Beichen's face couldn't help but darken. What did she mean by worrying about him being alone? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that Xiren and Shangguan Yingying were really worried about his marriage. Chapter 1782. Hearing Di Beichen's words, Shangguan Yingying waved her hand indifferently. Let him do whatever he wants. With that, Shangguan Yingying sat down next to Bailey Hongzhuang, her pretty face filled with joy. Hongzhuang, you don't know, but when you went to participate in the assessment competition, Beichen was extremely nervous. Xiren and I have never seen him like that. Xiren kept lamenting to me that Di Beichen, who had never fallen in love before, had also fallen in love. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. She had always known that Beichen had deep feelings for her. It seemed that Beichen was really worried about her in the 2 years that she wasn't around. Di Beichen glanced at Shangguan Yingying, and then looked at Bailey Hongzhuang next to him with affection. His love for his wife could be witnessed by heaven and earth. Seeing that Di Beichen didn't care about what she had said, Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with amazement. Compared to Xiren's shamelessness, Di Beichen was more careful. Now that she had said such things, Di Beichen could still be so calm. It could be seen that the relationship between Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang was not ordinary. Hongzhuang, with you by Beichen's side, Xiren and I are much more relieved. Although it's only the first time we've met, I feel that we will become good friends. Shangguan Yingying's face was filled with a kind smile. She liked Bailey Hongzhuang very much at first sight. Di Beichen's outstanding appearance was well known. In the past, she and Xiren always felt that Di Beichen could not find a match for him. However, now that Hongzhuang was standing next to Di Beichen, they were an unusual match. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were soft, and her smile was sincere and joyful. We will definitely be good friends. She also had a good impression of Shangguan Yingying. This woman gave people a very sincere feeling when they first met. There was a real elegance in her speech. Although all this disappeared when she mentioned Xiren, she liked friends who treated her with sincerity. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had the same thoughts as her, the smile on Shengguan Yingying's face deepened. Beichen, you've made the right choice this time. The first time I saw Hongzhuang, I felt that you two were a good match. You're not like Han Shiling. I've seen him since he was a child, but I still feel that he's not suitable for you. Shengguan Yingying sighed. Speaking of which, she, Xiren, Di Beichen, and Han Shiling grew up together. However, she had never liked Han Shiling. She just didn't like Han Shiling's pretense of being aloof. He obviously didn't have much ability, but he still acted like he was great. She felt that he was pretentious and not down-to-earth at all. It was precisely because of this that most of the time, Di Beichen, Xiren, and she were often together. Hearing this, Di Beichen glanced at Shengguan Yingying and did not mention Han Shiling. Chapter 1783. Since he likes to run away from home so much, then let him go. I won't bother with him. Shengguan Yingying snorted coldly. Xiren had always been like this. Every time there was a conflict, he would only run away. This time, she also ignored Xiren. She wanted to see what Xiren would do. As she spoke, Shengguan Yingying once again looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile and said, Hongzhuang, I'm afraid I'll be staying in Tiangang's sect for this period of time. You won't find me annoying, right? Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head and said, Of course not. That's great. Shengguan Yingying was excited. Then I'll live with you for this period of time. I can also tell you about Di Beichen's past. Bailey Hongzhuang subconsciously looked at Di Beichen. Speaking of which, she was really curious about Di Beichen's past. Okay. Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. Seeing this, Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with deep meaning. His expression revealed some reluctance. Originally, he and Hongzhuang were enjoying their two-person world. He didn't expect that now Xiren wasn't enough to stir things up. There was also Shengguan Yingying. Looking at this situation, Yingying would probably rely on Hongzhuang for this period of time. Didn't this mean that he wouldn't have a chance during this period of time? This won't do. Di Beichen secretly thought in his heart. He had to quickly make Xiren and Yingying reconcile. Noticing Di Beichen's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang pretended not to see it. She was very clear about what this big pervert was thinking. Xiren had already heard Shengguan Yingying's movements in the room. The corners of his lips unconsciously rose a little. Every time he left, Yingying would arrive shortly after he arrived at Tiangang's sect. Thinking about it, Yingying would come to find him in the room soon. In terms of eloquence, he really couldn't compare to Yingying. He really didn't understand how a woman could be so calculative over such a small matter. However, he had been with Yingying for so many years and had experience in dealing with her. As long as he left, Yingying wouldn't be bothered by it anymore. After all, women were unreasonable when they were angry. If she was given some time to calm down, she would naturally understand. However, Xiren waited in the house for a long time, but Yingying did not come to find him. He could not help but frown. This wasn't right. Since Yingying was already here, why didn't she come to find him? She must have just met Hongzhuang. Yingying is greeting her. When Xiren pondered. Yes. That must be it. However, as time passed, Shengguan Yingying did not appear. When Xiren was dumbfounded. Where did Yingying go? Why hasn't she come yet? When Xiren frowned. The situation this time was obviously beyond his expectations. For so many years, the way he got along with Yingying had not changed. Why did Yingying not follow the routine today? As time passed, when Xiren became more and more anxious, and the thoughts in his mind became more and more could it be that I'm too wrong this time? Is Ying really angry? If she is really angry, she shouldn't come to Tiangang's sect to find me. What the hell is going on? When Ziren kept pacing in the room. The more he couldn't understand, the more anxious he became. If it weren't for his face, he would have gone out to find Shangguan Ying now. When Ziren was speechless, in any case, we're brothers. For other things, you can ask me for help. But for this kind of thing, it's better for you to solve it yourself. Di Beichen shook his head. He also had no experience in dealing with this kind of thing. Fortunately, Hong Zhuang had always had an excellent character. From the time they got along until now, they had been apart more than together. Naturally, it was impossible for them to have a dispute. Chapter 1785. At dinner time. Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Ying had dinner together. Shangguan Ying was extremely enthusiastic. She was like an old friend to Bailey Hongzhuang at first sight. She pulled Bailey Hongzhuang and said a lot of things to her. However, Bailey Hongzhuang could feel that Ying was still thinking about Ziren. From that subtle expression, it could be judged that she always looked outside the house from time to time. Although the movements were very small, they were still seen by Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked outside the house. She didn't know if Beichen would come over with Ziren at dinner time. She naturally hoped that the unpleasantness between Ying and Ziren could be resolved as soon as possible. In this way, Ying could be happier. Since Ying came, Ying had been talking about various things when she was young with Ziren and Di Beichen. Although Ying mainly talked about Beichen to her, she couldn't help but talk about Ziren. Just from this expression, Bailey Hongzhuang could understand Ying's feelings for Ziren. However, Beichen didn't come with Ziren until now. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. She didn't ask Ying why she was unhappy with Ziren this time. However, since Ying had already come to Tiangang's sect, Ziren should also come to see her. A moment later, 2 footsteps sounded outside the house. Hearing this sound, Shangguan Ying's eyes changed a little, but she forced herself not to look outside the house. When Ziren walked into the house behind Di Beichen. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen smiled gently and sat down beside Bailey Hongzhuang. When Ziren glanced at Di Beichen, then unnaturally sat down beside Shangguan Ying. Looking at this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but find it a little funny. She couldn't tell that Ziren's sunny and confident appearance from before would have such an expression when facing Ying. Shangguan Ying also knew that Ziren was beside her, but she didn't say anything. She only minded her own business and ate her own food. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Shangguan Ying and then at Wen Ziren. Neither of them spoke. Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand under the table and said with a smile, "Don't worry about them. It'll be fine in a while." Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know how Di Beichen came to this conclusion, but she always believed in Di Beichen's words. Under Di Beichen's signal, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly finished her meal and then walked out of the house with Di Beichen. Shangguan Hongzhuang couldn't help but want to say something when she saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to leave. However, she still didn't say anything after Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and left. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang returned to their own house together. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a faint smile. Chapter 1786. The next day. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen saw Shangguan Ying and Wen Ziren again, everything was as Di Beichen had expected. The two of them had reconciled. From afar, they could feel the closeness between the two. Bailey Hongzhuang also understood Di Beichen's feelings when he saw the two of them being so sweet. "How did you know that they would reconcile so quickly?" Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen. The quarrel yesterday seemed to be very serious. It would take a while for them to reconcile. Husband and wife always quarrel at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end of the bed. If you don't believe me, you can try it in the future. Di Baichen's smile was devilish and teasing. In his eyes, such an ignorant wife was really cute. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was startled at first. After understanding Di Baichen's meaning, he couldn't help but glare at Di Baichen. Di Baichen smiled indifferently. Every time he teased his wife, it was always very interesting. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang, Shangguan Yingying walked over with a smile. "Hongzhuang, you're here." Bailey Hongzhuang greeted her with a smile. "It's great to see that you two have reconciled." Shangguan Yingying curled her lips and subconsciously glanced at Ziren. Then she smiled and said, "If he didn't admit his mistake, I wouldn't have forgiven him." Ziren slowly walked over with a helpless expression. Then he raised his eyebrows and looked at Di Baichen. He had to coax his wife like this. In the future, he would have to do the same. However, Di Baichen didn't care. He wouldn't make Hongzhuang angry. "Hongzhuang, I heard that you were the champion of the assessment competition. I really admire you. In order to be together with Baichen, you even participated in the assessment competition. If you're not careful, you might be in danger." Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with amazement. If it were her, she would not do such a thing. Bailey Hongzhuang said with an elegant smile on her exquisite and beautiful face, "There are some things that you should take responsibility for." Until now, she did not regret her decision to participate in the assessment competition. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang so calm, Shangguan Yingying and Wen Ziren felt even more emotional. Di Baichen's vision was always good. He went to Fengbo country and was able to find such a good wife. As friends, they were happy for Di Baichen. Han Xiling is always so aggressive. "Hongzhuang, I'm starting to like you more and more." Shangguan Yingying turned to Di Baichen and said, "Baichen, Hongzhuang is my friend. If you dare to mistreat her in the future, I won't let you off. If I mistreat her, who else can I treat well?" Di Baichen's expression was calm. From the moment he fell in love with Hongzhuang, he was determined to treat Hongzhuang well. He would not forgive anyone who dared to hurt Hongzhuang, and it was even more impossible for him to do so. Seeing Di Baichen's solemn expression, Shangguan Yingying was slightly stunned, but then she smiled. "It's good that you know." Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Baichen in front of her, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously rose. Baichen had always been able to give her an indescribable sense of security. Di Baichen put one hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. "You don't have to worry about me and Hongzhuang. It's good that you don't have to have any conflicts." Chapter 1788. The cultivators of Tiangang sect no longer disliked Bailey Hongzhuang as before because after the assessment competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had already proven her strength. Now, everyone could only sigh with emotion at Bailey Hongzhuang's good luck to be able to meet the young sect master when he was at his lowest point. She was really lucky. In fact, many people also understood that Bailey Hongzhuang was not trying to climb up the social ladder. This was because when the young sect master left Tiangang sect, he had already become a cripple. Even the disciples who were cultivating in Tiangang sect at that time felt that the young sect master would never be able to stand up again after seeing him in that state. Therefore, at that time, other than lamenting, they did not have any thoughts of getting close to the young sect master. Therefore, it was not strange for the young sect master to fall in love with Bailey Hongzhuang. The feeling of providing charcoal in snowy weather was often extremely precious. Some male cultivators understood this very well. The woman who climbed up the social ladder when they were successful could not be compared to the woman who accompanied them when they were suffering. It was because they understood this feeling that many male cultivators respected Bailey Hongzhuang. To be able to be together with Di Baichen under such circumstances, this kind of woman was worthy of admiration. Bailey Hongzhuang listened to the discussions of the surrounding cultivators and could not help but find it funny. It seemed that in many people's eyes, she was the one with extremely good luck. Young sect master, Miss Bailey. A grey figure appeared beside Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen and bowed to them with a modest smile on his face. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but turn around to look at the person. She had met this elder before but she did not know him very well. Di Beichen lowered his head to see Bailey Hongzhuang's astonished look and immediately explained. It should have been the great elder who came to welcome the new disciple, but the great elder is still in confinement, so the second elder was sent. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly understood. She had not seen the great elder since he was punished. She understood that whether it was her grandfather or Beichen, they were slowly dispersing the power in the great elder's hands. Since she recognized her grandfather, he had doted on her very much, and she also understood that her grandfather was a very protective person. Since the great elder was a threat to her, her grandfather naturally would not let such a threat continue to exist. Perhaps, the great elder would not come out for a while. Even if he came out, the situation would be completely different from before. However, this was a good thing for her. Originally, she was still a little worried that after she came to Tiangang's sect to cultivate, the first elder would obstruct her. Now that the first elder was punished and confined, she was also free of this trouble. Second elder. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed to the second elder, Xiaoyingzi. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang bowing to him, Xiaoyingzi was slightly stunned and somewhat flattered. Everyone knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was the future wife of the young sect master and her status was very noble. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master had not yet married, so as the elders of the sect, they were very conflicted about how to treat Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, seeing Bailey Hongzhuang bowing to him, he could not help but be a little surprised. This. Chapter 1790. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Dongfang Yu and the others all laughed. With the results they achieved in the assessment competition, it was natural for them to be praised when they returned to their respective dynasties. The people in their families were also very good to them. Under the glorious eyes of everyone, they only felt that the hardships they suffered in the assessment competition were nothing at all. For the final result, everything was worth it. They seemed to have become heroes the moment they returned. Everyone praised them and many young cultivators regarded them as idols. Such a scene was beyond their expectations. In the past, they had never thought that they would one day achieve such good results. Under such circumstances, they were naturally in a good mood, and their faces immediately became rosy. "Boss, you don't know, after I went back this time, the people in the family praised me to the sky." Xia Jiqing's face could not hide the excitement. She had never enjoyed such treatment in the family before. Although her cultivation talent was not bad, because her personality was too straightforward, there were not many people in the family who liked her. However, after going back this time, her situation had completely changed. "Do you still remember Tong Shengyi?" Xia Jiqing asked aloud. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a while and immediately nodded. Thinking back, it was because Tong Shengyi kept finding trouble with her that she met Jiqing. However, after Tong Shengyi learned that she was a student of the special enrollment class, she did not provoke her. Gradually, she didn't take Tong Shengyi to heart. The Tong family is not far from our Xia family. I have had conflicts with Tong Shengyi since I was a child. When I went back, Tong Shengyi was also at home. After she knew my results, she was furious. When she thought of Tong Shengyi's sullen, excited and incredulous expression, she felt a burst of joy. In the past, Tong Shengyi always liked to be arrogant in front of her, but now she could only tuck her tail in front of her. Looking at Xia Jiqing's happy appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang's smile widened. As early as the first time they met, she knew that there was a grudge between Jiqing and Tong Shengyi. Now that she could hold her head high, it was indeed a happy thing. At this moment, Yuan Xiaoman also walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, her delicate face filled with a joyful smile. "Boss," Li Qing was so excited when she found out that you and I were on the same team. When Yuan Xiaoman returned to the Snow Origin country, her and Yuan Jixian's results in the assessment had already been made known to everyone. Therefore, when they returned to the clan, everyone in the clan was already there to welcome them. When Yuan Hongyang and Yuan Liqing found out that it was because of their boss that they were able to achieve such results in the competition, they were extremely shocked. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "How is Liqing doing now?" "She's doing very well, she just hopes to see you again one day," Yuan Xiaoman said with a smile. Yuan Jixin also walked up at this moment, his handsome face relaxed and happy. "Boss, Hongyang asked me to thank you on behalf of the entire Yuan family. If it weren't for you, the Yuan family's situation wouldn't be as good as it is now." Chapter 1791. Back then, when the big boss and the young sect master had gone to Origin Martial City, they had helped the Yuan family. Otherwise, the Yuan family would have fallen into trouble. After that, he and Xiaoman had met the big boss and had been helped by the big boss. This news had exceeded the expectations of everyone in the Yuan family. In the history of the Snow Origin dynasty, there has never been such a good result. Therefore, their names have now spread throughout the entire Snow Origin country. Even though he had a dream of becoming a hero since he was young, he had never thought that he would actually be able to achieve it. Now, he was a hero that everyone in the Snow Origin country knew about. The entire Yuan family was proud of him and Xiaoman. All of this was because of the big boss. If it had not been for the big boss, forget about becoming a hero, they would have become corpses in the great examination. Therefore, Yuan Jixin's gratitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang could no longer be expressed in words. He had already secretly vowed that he would go through water and tread on fire for the big boss in the future. If it had not been for the big boss, they would have lost everything by now. Therefore, their lives belonged to the big boss. It was not only Yuan Jixin, Yuan Xiaoman also had the same thought. In the future, anyone who tried to harm the big boss would be their enemy. If they wanted to harm the big boss, they would have to step over their bodies. Bailey Hongzhuang was unaware of Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman's thoughts. After hearing Yuan Hongzhuang's gratitude towards her, she could not help but smile. Unknowingly, so much time had passed since they had been in the blood-ground abyss. If she had the chance, she would really like to go back with Beichen and have a look. "You don't have to be so polite, we're all friends." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was light and pleasant to the ear. When she thought about how they had left the Tian Gang sect 2 years ago without knowing the future and how they had all become disciples of the Tian Gang sect, her heart was filled with joy. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, who didn't feel like she had done anything great, Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman looked at each other and smiled. Their big boss was like that. She had clearly done something that they were deeply grateful towards, yet she felt that it was nothing. However, it was this kind of big boss that they were willing to give up everything for. This was boss's charm. Di Beichen glanced at the cultivators present. Apart from Bailey Hongzhuang, there were a total of 10 people present. "Since everyone is here, let's go in." Di Beichen's voice was gentle and dignified. In front of Hongzhuang, he was always gentle, but in front of other practitioners, he had to show the dignity of a young sect leader. As Bailey Hongzhuang's words fell, Xia Jiqing and the others were stunned. From today onwards, they were disciples of Tiangang sect. This day was of great significance to them. Although Di Beichen had always been a friend in his eyes, this was Tiangang sect, and Di Beichen was their young sect master. Therefore, their attitude could not be as casual as before. At least, in front of others. Bailey Hongzhuang quietly walked into the team. From today on, she was also a new disciple of Tiangang sect. Everything needed to be done well. Chapter 1793. Behind Xia Jiqing and the others, Pan Zimo and Dong Hongyun couldn't help but look at each other. After seeing that Di Beichen was so good to Bailey Hongzhuang, their hearts were full of shock. Although they already knew the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, now that they saw how much Di Beichen doted on Bailey Hongzhuang, they couldn't help but be speechless. As early as the end of the assessment, Di Beichen personally went to pick up Bailey Hongzhuang. This scene made everyone surprised. In the past, they were also proud, but in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master, they didn't have the capital to be proud. Dong Hongyun couldn't help but rejoice. After knowing the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, he apologized in time and was forgiven by Bailey Hongzhuang. If that was the case, the only path left for him was death. Thinking that Han Xiling died in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, but the young sect master was still so good to Bailey Hongzhuang. Just this point, it could be seen that Bailey Hongzhuang's extraordinary status. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang was not a vengeful person. Now he was also full of gratitude to Bailey Hongzhuang. Under the circumstances at that time, if Bailey Hongzhuang was not willing to forgive him, this was also very normal. Pan Zimo's mood was also very good. Before participating in the assessment, he was looking forward to the day when he could enter Tiangang sect. Now, this dream had really come true. Thinking of the various things he had in the dynasty a few days ago, he really felt that his hard work for such a long time was worth it. He also felt fortunate that he met Mo Yinjue and the others at that time. Otherwise, he was afraid that he might not have such a good result now. Cheng Hefeng and Yu Junfei were both disciples of Tiangang sect. Cheng Hefeng was in the top 10. At that time, when he was choosing a sect, he chose Tiangang sect. Speaking of which, all of this was really a coincidence. Except for Shi Cairong, the four of them had interacted with Bailey Hongzhuang before. As early as at the end of the assessment, when he saw the scene of Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang hugging each other, Cheng Hefeng felt lucky that he didn't fall out with Bailey Hongzhuang at that time. Otherwise, in that case, he could only go to other sections. After all, if he offended the young sect master's wife, how could he have a good result if he stayed in the sect to cultivate? Originally, he didn't understand how Bailey Hongzhuang could become a sealing master with her strength. Now that he knew the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, he completely understood. With Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, it wasn't strange for her to become a sealing master. Some of the geniuses in sects couldn't be judged by common sense. Even if they were of the same age, the cultivators in sects were usually much stronger than them. Yu Junfei didn't know what to say. He only felt that Fang Wenqing was right to die. Di Beichen glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. You can choose the branch palace that you want to cultivate. I will not accompany you there. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and smiled sweetly. I understand. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's bright smile, Di Beichen's eyes lit up. Even though he had been with Hongzhuang for such a long time, every time she smiled, he would be stunned. He thought that he had been poisoned by a poison called Hongzhuang. However, he was willing to endure it. Now everyone follow me to the conference hall. After leaving a sentence, Xiaoyingze walked in the direction of the conference hall. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also followed behind Xiaoyingze. Chapter 1795. After Di Beichen left, Xia Jiqing went to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. However, because the second elder was in front and they were about to go to the conference hall, she did not dare to pull Hongzhuang to say anything else. After the report was completed, she could have a good chat with her boss about what had happened during this period of time. Gong Shaoqing and the others followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, while Cheng Hufeng's group of 4 walked at the back. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had such a good relationship with the cultivators in her team, they couldn't help but feel sad. The cultivators in her team were a group of extremely lucky guys. Under the leadership of the second elder, after walking for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also arrived at the conference hall. Xiao Yingze knocked on the door of the conference hall. After hearing the sound coming from the door, he pushed open the door of the conference hall and walked in with the new disciples. In their line of sight, they saw the 4 palace masters sitting on the seats on both sides. With the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, the eyes of the 4 palace masters fell on them. Feeling the eyes of the palace masters, Xia Jiqing and the others all held their breath and showed a serious look on their faces. The eyes of the 4 palace masters looked at everyone. This time, Tiangang's sect had recruited 12 cultivators in the top 100 of the assessment competition. This number was already very good. After all, the strength of the top 10 sects was not weak. Most of the time, each sect had 10 people. This time, the young sect master personally came out and the effect was really different. The second elder's voice sounded. The work of the great elder had now fallen on her. Tiangang's sect is divided into 4 halls, namely Azure Dragon Hall, White Tiger Hall, Vermilion Bird Hall and Black Tortoise Hall. This is the Azure Dragon Hall Master, Yan Kaicheng. This is the White Tiger Hall Master, Qi Yinghan. This is the Vermilion Bird Hall Master, Qin Ai. This is the Black Tortoise Hall Master, Gu Jingqing. The second elder introduced the identities of the 4 palace masters to the new disciples. All the disciples of Tiangang's sect would cultivate in these 4 halls. The strength of the 4 halls was similar and there was competition. In Tiangang's sect, there would be a competition between the 4 halls every once in a while. With competition, there was motivation. This was also implemented in the sect. This was because once there was no competition, the cultivator would naturally not feel nervous and would gradually become lazy. Listening to the second elder's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, one after another, they bowed and said, "Greetings to the 4 palace masters." Today, Bailey Hongzhuang was a lot more indifferent when facing the 4 palace lords. When she first met the 4 palace lords, she was still very worried. But now, this feeling had obviously disappeared. The Azure Dragon Hall Master Xiao Hongzhen and the White Tiger Hall Master Jiang Yi had already disappeared from the Tiangang sect. As for how the sovereign dealt with them, Bailey Hongzhuang did not ask. However, she only needed to know that their ending would definitely not be good. Yan Kaicheng and Qi Yinghan were the 2 palace masters chosen by the sect master. The strength and influence of these 2 people were very clear. Of course, these 2 people were completely on the sect master and young sect master's side and did not have any disloyalty. Chapter 1797. When Yuan Xiaoman saw that Bai Junyu had chosen to cultivate in the same hall as Xia Jiqing, her eyes were filled with sadness. Did this mean that Xia Jiqing was always the one who occupied the most weight in Bai Junyu's heart? She and Jiqing were good friends, and she never had the idea of competing with Jiqing for a sweetheart. All the choices were Bai Junyu's. If Bai Junyu chose her, she would be happy. But if Bai Junyu chose Xia Jiqing, she would also give her blessings. No matter what, they were great friends. Yuan Jixin also noticed the change in Yuan Xiaoman's expression. He knew about Xiaoman's feelings for Bai Junyu. Although Yuan Xiaoman was usually carefree, as if she didn't care about anything, he and Xiaoman grew up together, so he knew that this was the first time Xiaoman liked someone. Thinking about it, the first time you liked someone but was rejected, this feeling must be very uncomfortable. As Xiaoman's brother, he could only comfort her. Yuan Jixin patted Yuan Xiaoman's shoulder, only hoping that she wouldn't be too sad because of this. At least, her brother had always been by her side. Feeling Yuan Jixin's care, Yuan Xiaoman pulled a smile on her face and shook her head at Yuan Jixin, indicating that she was fine. Because Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman would definitely cultivate together, and Gong Xiaoqing and Dong Fangyu, who had been good brothers for so many years, would naturally not be separated. Therefore, the grouping was quickly determined. Bailey Hongzhuang, Xia Jiqing, and Bai Junyu stood in front of Qin Ai together. Qin Ai smiled slightly. He had already known that Bailey Hongzhuang would come to his team. Not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as the granddaughter of the sovereign, just the first place of the assessment, Bailey Hongzhuang came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he would definitely train her well. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two bowed to Qin Ai. In the future, they would follow Hall Master Qin. Gong Xiaoqing, Dong Fangyu, and Pan Zimo stood in front of Yan Kaicheng. They chose the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. It just so happened that the three men were very suitable to cultivate in the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. Yuan Jixin, Yuan Xiaoman, and Dong Hongyun chose White Tiger Hall. Compared to Cheng Hefeng and the others, they were more familiar with Dong Hongyun. Although they once had a conflict with Dong Hongyun, all the conflicts had vanished into thin air. Moreover, Dong Hongyun had helped them in the past, so they had a good impression of Dong Hongyun. Cheng Hefeng, Yu Junfei, and Shi Cairong remained in the Black Tortoise Hall. The four hall masters nodded their heads in satisfaction when they saw that everyone had quickly chosen their respective sub-halls. Today is everyone's first day of reporting. After confirming your respective training halls, there won't be any problems. Later, when you go to your respective branch halls, the elders will tell you where you will live in the future. Cultivate well in the branch halls, Yan Kaicheng said slowly. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang replied. Although you have defeated many opponents to become a member of Tiangang's sect, don't think that you can relax after coming here. Here, your cultivation life has just begun. If you don't cultivate well and improve, then you will also be eliminated by Tiangang's sect. The results you obtained in the assessment competition are indeed very good, but here, there are countless cultivators who are more outstanding and more talented than you. Chapter 1798. The White Tiger Hall Master, Qi Yinghan, was more solemn. Every time a new disciple joined the Tiangang sect, he had to sound the alarm. After obtaining very good results in the assessment competition, these young people were bound to endure all kinds of flattery and fawning after returning home. In this way, many cultivators would lose their nature and think that they were outstanding enough. However, such thinking was absolutely not allowed in the Tiangang sect. The Tiangang sect itself was a place where the survival of the fittest prevailed. Compared to the environment these cultivators lived in previously, this place was even crueler. As long as one's strength was not strong enough, they would be the target of everyone's ridicule. He wanted to tell all the new disciples that in this place, they had to rein in their previous pride and complacency. In this place, they were newcomers who had nothing. Following Qi Yinghan's words, Gong Xiaoqing and the others' hearts all trembled. The original joy and pride in their hearts were shattered with these words. During this period of time, their hearts had indeed been somewhat complacent because of their recent results. At this moment, after hearing Qi Yinghan's words, they could not help but start to examine themselves. Even if they obtained good results in the assessment competition, they were probably at the bottom of the Tiangang sect. This was because many cultivators in the Tiangang sect were selected from the assessment competition. In addition, the previous cultivators had already stayed in the Tiangang sect to cultivate for such a long time. They really could not compare with the other party in any aspect. Understood. Everyone's faces were filled with seriousness. From now on, they had to let go of everything in the past and cultivate humbly and seriously. Qi Yinghan's gaze swept across everyone. After seeing that everyone had an appearance of humbly accepting his teachings, he also revealed a satisfied expression. If the new disciples did not sound the alarm when they arrived at the sect, they would inevitably cause some trouble in the following period of time. They had all seen this before. Chapter 1799. After the four hallmasters finished their speech, they stood up and left the assembly hall. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also followed the palace lords they had chosen and walked out. "Boss, we'll go to White Tiger Hall first. When we have time, we'll come and find you." Yuan Xiaoman walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. She hadn't seen her boss for more than 2 months and originally wanted to talk to her more. She didn't expect that they were actually cultivating in different halls. Although they all belonged to Tiangang's sect, it wouldn't be so easy to see each other often in the future. Tiangang's sect's area was very large, and different halls were on different peaks. Although they could come and go, the distance wasn't close. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "The future is long. We'll all be in Tiangang's sect and have many opportunities to meet." Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Yuan Xiaoman also revealed a happy smile. "Okay, although it's a pity that we can't cultivate in the same hall, but boss, I'll definitely work hard to cultivate." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "You can still see each other often. Come and find us often." Gong Xiaoqing and Dong Fangyu also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Dong Fangyu was as bright and handsome as ever. "Hongzhuang, I wanted to ask you how you've been in Tiangang's sect during this period of time, but now there's no chance. Next time, let's find a chance to get together." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and smiled faintly. "No problem, just come and find us." Cheng Hifeng also couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. In Tiangang's sect, Bailey Hongzhuang was really a doted existence. As early as the end of the assessment competition, Bailey Hongzhuang already knew that Cheng Hifeng and Yu Junfei were also Tiangang's sect's disciples. She also felt a wave of amazement towards this miraculous fate. Although she almost fought with Cheng Hifeng and Yu Junfei before, in the end, the conflict didn't develop to the maximum. Bailey Hongzhuang also had some admiration for Cheng Hifeng. After all, there were not many cultivators who were as smart and magnanimous as Cheng Hifeng. Being a smiling tiger was also one of his abilities. If it was an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to do what Cheng Hifeng did. Cheng Hifeng smiled politely at Bailey Hongzhuang, as if nothing had happened during the assessment. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling person. Cheng Hifeng had always been very thorough about this point. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also nodded. Now they were all disciples of Tiangang's sect. Compared to the situation of absolute competition in the past, they were now in the same team. Therefore, there was no need for a tit-for-tat. When Yu Junfei saw Cheng Hifeng's reaction, he felt both jealousy and admiration. It had to be said that Cheng Hifeng's way of dealing with people was watertight. In this aspect, he could not compare to Cheng Hifeng. Soon, the 4 hall masters headed in 4 different directions. Bailey Hongzhuang, Xia Jiqing, and Bai Junyu followed behind Qin Ai and walked in the direction of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Although they had all been to Tiangang's sect, they hadn't been to the 4 main halls and didn't know what the situation was like. Bailey Hongzhuang had been staying in Tiangang's sect these days, but she hadn't been to other places except for Di Beichen's palace. Naturally, she didn't know where the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was. Chapter 1800. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 followed behind Qin Ai and looked at the environment of Tiangang's sect. Now it seemed that Tiangang's sect really had a different world. The size of the area was really amazing. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 did not communicate. After all, they were very afraid of the palace master in front of them. In the process of going to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 also met a lot of disciples who were coming here. All the disciples would bow and greet Qin Ai when they saw him. However, Qin Ai still had an indifferent and amiable look on his face. The eyes of the crowd of disciples couldn't help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Today was the day when the new disciples reported, and everyone was very familiar with the process. At this moment, looking at the situation, they knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two would be cultivators of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall in the future. I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to choose Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Palace Master Qin's temper has always been very good. It's not strange that Bailey Hongzhuang came to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. It seems that Bailey Hongzhuang did not use her privileges and intends to cultivate in Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. That's not necessarily true. We have to see Bailey Hongzhuang's performance later to know. I think that since Bailey Hongzhuang has been confirmed to be the future wife of the young sect master, she probably doesn't need to work so hard. As early as Bailey Hongzhuang had been staying in Di Beichen's palace, many disciples thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was likely to follow the young sect master to cultivate in the future and would not go to one of the four main halls to cultivate. Now looking at the situation in front of them, they knew that their previous guesses were wrong. The real situation was not like this. Xia Jiqing listened to everyone's discussion and could not help but frown. It seemed that everyone still had a lot of guesses and doubts about the boss. The speed of Qin Ai and Bailey Hongzhuang and the others was not slow. After a long while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally arrived at Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. A huge palace appeared in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two, magnificent and spectacular. At a glance, no one would think that this was just a side hall. My God, Vermilion Bird Palace Hall is so big, it's shocking. Xia Jiqing's face was filled with shock. She knew that Tiangang's sect had always been big, but the situation in front of her was a bit too amazing. Such a large hall was only one of the four main halls. Didn't this mean that the other three halls were also of the same size? I wouldn't have imagined it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. We'll be cultivating here in the future. It looks pretty good. The corner of Bai Junyu's mouth held a trace of a faint smile. When he first saw this Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he had a feeling of yearning. Thinking that he would be cultivating here in the future, he couldn't help but feel happy. Bailey Hongzhuang also had some feelings in her heart. This was the heritage of the sect. Compared to 1,000 years ago, the sect today was undoubtedly more magnificent, giving people a sense of shock. In the center of this palace, there were three big words written in flamboyant calligraphy, Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Although it was only 3 words, from these words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two could feel an indescribable sense of sharpness. There was sword intent condensed in these words. After staring at these words for a long time, they only felt a pain in their eyes and could not continue to look at it. After seeing the reaction of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Qin Ai also introduced it. Chapter 1801. Listening to Qin Ai's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes were filled with shock. The first sect master of Tiangang sect. Tiangang sect had been passed down for many years, and the first sect master existed many years ago. However, those who were the first to establish a sect were usually the most talented people. To open up a sect in an environment where there were so many sects, the process was definitely difficult and not simple. The first sect master's swordsmanship must be extremely powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. How much understanding of the sword did he have to be able to integrate the sword intent into the words? Qin Ai smiled and nodded, her expression was full of admiration and reverence. The first sect master's swordsmanship was indeed superb, and no one could compare to him. Even in the history books of Tiangang's sect, it was recorded that the first sect master's swordsmanship was fierce. The reason why the first sect master was able to open up the sect was because of his swordsmanship. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two also showed admiration. If there was no first sect master, then there would not be the current Tiangang sect. In the sect, many disciples who practice swordsmanship often come to look at this plaque and comprehend the sword intent in the words. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. We can rely on these words to comprehend the sword intent. Yes, the first sect master integrated the sword intent into the words in order to let the disciples of the sect benefit infinitely. In this way, any cultivator who practices swordsmanship can comprehend from these words. 100 years ago, there was a disciple who understood the sword intent in the words in my Tiangang sect. His swordsmanship was unparalleled among the younger generation of cultivators. He got the true inheritance of the first sect master. With Qin Ai's voice falling, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's eyes looking at the plaque had changed. They never thought that the words in the plaque turned out to be a kind of inheritance. It was really unexpected. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu didn't know what to say at the moment. They always felt that after coming to Tiangang's sect, they had a feeling of being country people entering a city. Everything here showed a strong and deep foundation. There was not a single thing they could casually ignore. After noticing the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two, the smile in Qin Ai's eyes deepened. She said, "After you have stayed in Tiangang's sect for a long time, you will know all of this. Now, report to the resource elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two looked in the direction that Qin Ai was pointing at and noticed that there was an elder not far away. "Thank you, Palace Master." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two thanked Qin Ai for her guidance. Naturally, the hall master would not be in charge of their living arrangements. It was already an honor for the palace master to lead them to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall on the first day of reporting. It should be known that it was extremely difficult for cultivators to meet the palace master. As long as nothing major happened in the sub-palace, the palace master would not appear. Qin Ai slowly disappeared from the sight of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Only then did they turn around and walk towards the resource elder. "Greetings to the elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two respectfully bowed. "We are the new disciples who came to report today." The elder then looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. After noticing Bailey Hongzhuang, his eyes changed a bit and then he smiled. Chapter 1802. The key to your room, the disciple uniform, and the sect manual are all in the Qiankuan bag. You can take a look at it yourself. The place where the disciples of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall live, after you enter the hall, turn left, and each room has a number written on it. All you need to do is to enter your own house according to the house number. If there is still something you don't understand, come and ask me. The resource elder said aloud. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two took the Qiankuan bag and immediately knew the room they lived in. "Thank you, elder." Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two bowed again. As far as they were concerned, there was nothing they didn't understand. The elder nodded slightly, and Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two left. The inside of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was also very bright. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two went to the left according to the elder's instructions. The scope of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was very large. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked to the place where the disciples lived, they found that the number of rooms here was really not small. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two found their respective rooms. Fortunately, because the three of them came to Vermilion Bird Palace Hall to report together, their rooms were also adjacent. Our rooms are connected, it will be convenient in the future. Xia Jiqing's face was full of excitement. She had made up her mind to be together with the boss. If they lived far away, or if they didn't practice together, it would undoubtedly make her depressed. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. This feeling is similar to when we were in Azure Water College. Thinking back to when they were in Azure Water College, the three of them also lived on the first floor of the special enrollment dormitory. Now, the situation was exactly the same and had not changed. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu looked at each other and smiled. After Hong Zhuang said this, they really felt that the situation was very similar. Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door and saw that the room also had everything, and the treatment was very good. Compared to the living environment in Azure Water College, it seemed to be better here. No wonder so many cultivators are racking their brains to enter the sect. This treatment is indeed excellent. Bai Junyu sighed faintly. Living here was the dream life of many cultivators. We'll be living here for a long time in the future. The environment is pretty good. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and smiled. This place was spacious enough for her to place an alchemy furnace or draw inscriptions. In comparison, the dormitory of the Azure Water School was not as big as this one. As for some daily necessities, they had already prepared them in their Qinquan bags, so they only needed to tidy up a little before they could move in. Xia Jiqing did not enter her room, but followed Bailey Hongzhuang into her room. "Boss, how have you been in Tiangang sect these days?" Xia Jiqing asked with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. "I'm doing pretty well here. Just like you guys." To her now, Tiangang sect was her home. That was because her grandfather was here. Her grandfather was the only relative she had found in the world. Xia Jiqing, who was still a little worried, couldn't help but feel relieved after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. "The Great Elder didn't embarrass you?" "I always feel that the Great Elder is not easy to deal with." Chapter 1803. Feeling Xia Jiqing's concern for her, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but hold Xia Jiqing's hand. Her beautiful face was filled with a gentle and touched smile. "On the first day I came to Tiangang sect, the Great Elder did come to trouble me." As soon as these words came out, Xia Jiqing couldn't help but show a nervous look. "I said that the Great Elder is not an easy person to deal with. He will definitely come to trouble you. Don't worry, the Great Elder is now in confinement. Otherwise, what you saw just now would not be the second elder, but the Great Elder." Xia Jiqing frowned, and there was a bit of joy in her eyes, but more of it was astonishment. "The Great Elder is in confinement? Did the young sect master do it?" Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head slightly. "The sect master ordered it. It is estimated that he will not come out in a short time, so you don't need to worry." Xia Jiqing's expression tightened, and she approached Bailey Hongzhuang, her eyes full of curiosity and joy. "Boss, has the sect master already agreed to you and the young sect master being together? Anyway, now that Han Xiling is gone, no one is your competitor. The young sect master likes you so much, the sect master should not object anymore, right?" Since the fall of Han Xiling, Xia Jiqing felt that the path of the boss was much smoother. After all, Han Xiling was a big stumbling block. What's more, the sect master's attitude towards the boss was also good, obviously there was no dissatisfaction. The sect master did not object. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Now her grandfather was very satisfied with her and Beichen together, and only hoped that they could get married soon. Whether it was her, Beichen, or her grandfather, they all decided to hold the wedding after they rescued their parents. "That's great." Xia Jiqing was overjoyed. This was undoubtedly excellent news. Now that the Great Elder is in confinement, there is no way to destroy you and the young sect master. It seems that it won't be long before the boss becomes the young sect master's wife. Looking at Xia Jiqing's happy appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but smile. Now, there were no obstacles between her and Beichen. Compared to the heaviness when she first came to Tiangang sect, the current result was undoubtedly much better. There were still 2 hurdles in front of them that needed to be crossed. She hoped that everything could be crossed like this, one by one. Bailey Hongzhuang then looked at Xia Jiqing. There was no problem between her and Beichen now, but the problem between Jiqing and Junyu seemed to have not been resolved. How are you and Junyu now? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, Xia Jiqing's expression, which was originally full of joy, suddenly stiffened and fell into silence. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang understood. She sighed. Even among cultivators of the same cultivation, there would be a certain difference in combat strength. These two lists were usually placed on the training field, and anyone who came here would be able to see them. It was precisely because of this that the cultivators at the bottom would definitely feel humiliated. This method could also promote the cultivation of the disciples. After all, when everyone around you was working hard to cultivate while you were the only one who remained stagnant, even you would feel ashamed of yourself. Looking at these two lists, cultivators would clearly know their ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Chapter 1807. I didn't expect the pressure of the cultivators in the aristocratic families to be so big. I thought that the disciples of aristocratic families were very great. Xia Jiqing sighed faintly. It seemed that no matter who it was, they would have some troubles. She used to think that the children of aristocratic families were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. They would live a life of luxury and were not comparable to ordinary people. Now listening to her boss's explanation, she only felt that what she thought before was too simple. Everything was not so easy. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. It is precisely because their resources are beyond the reach of others that the family's requirements for them are higher. In a cultivation aristocratic family, there would be many cultivators in the younger generation. Under the accumulation of rich and excellent resources, almost every generation would have amazing talents. On the contrary, under the same cultivation resources, the return of some children was not proportional to their efforts. Then the situation of these disciples was undoubtedly extremely bad. The bigger the family, the crueler it was. Xia Jiqing nodded slightly. The strength of those aristocratic family disciples should be stronger than us. I feel that if I don't work hard, I am afraid that I will really be at the bottom. Even if the performance of the aristocratic family disciples who came to Tiangang's sect was not outstanding, compared to the cultivators who came from the grassroots, their strength should be stronger. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, "It is not so absolute, but we do need to work hard. The palace lord is right. Coming to Tiangang's sect is just a starting point. What kind of results we have in the future will depend on ourselves." Xia Jiqing's eyes changed a bit. She had rested for 3 months and could be said to be extremely relaxed. However, today was only the first day in Tiangang's sect and she felt an indescribable sense of tension. This feeling was as if there was a flood beast chasing after her. As long as she slacked a little, she may be swallowed into the stomach. She did not dare to not work hard. She had to work hard because she did not want to be at the bottom. Looking at Xia Jiqing's dignified expression, Bailey Hongzhuang patted her shoulder and said, "Jiqing, don't be so nervous. Your performance in the assessment competition is very good, not to mention your talent is not bad, and your strength has improved very quickly. Back then, we also came here one by one when no one was optimistic about us. Now, the gap between us and the other cultivators is not that big. Do you still not have confidence?" After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing, who was originally a little tense, also relaxed a little. "Boss, you're right. I'll definitely work hard." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "I just reported in today, so I don't have much to do. Why don't we go to the resource hall to collect cultivation resources?" Obtaining cultivation resources would definitely be beneficial to their cultivation. Sure. Xia Jiqing nodded. She was also very curious about what kind of cultivation resources the Tiangang Zong disciples would have. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing were about to leave, Bai Junyu's voice came from outside their door. Jiqing, Hongzhuang, do you want to go to the resource hall to collect cultivation resources? Hearing this voice, Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing looked at each other and smiled. They immediately opened the door and went out. Chapter 18:10. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Although they did not cultivate in the same hall, at least they were all in Tiangang's sect. There were not many restrictions on the disciples here, and it was very simple for them to get together on weekdays. Although there was some distance, for them as cultivators, it was not a distance at all. I have long heard that the cultivation resources of Tiangang's sect disciples are very rich. Today, I can finally come and see it. Pan Zimo smiled. Tiangang's sect was a place he had been yearning for a long time. Today, he could finally become a member here. He had not yet woken up from such a surprise. Listening to Pan Zimo's words, everyone's face was filled with a touch of expectation. Let's go in. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the joy and eagerness on everyone's faces and immediately said. Everyone nodded and then walked into the resource hall. There were many disciples in the resource hall. Today was the beginning of the month, and the beginning of each month was the day when the cultivation resources were distributed. Therefore, the disciples of Tiangang's sect would come to receive the resources these days. As Bailey Hongzhuang and the others walked into the resource hall, they saw that the entire resource hall was very bright. Looking carefully, they found that the resource hall was also divided into several areas. At first glance, Bailey Hongzhuang saw the resource room of Zhuke Palace Hall. Dongfang Yu and others naturally noticed this situation, and there was a touch of surprise in their eyes. It seems that the disciples of each branch hall will receive cultivation resources in their respective areas. In their line of sight, there were not only the resource rooms of the 4 branches, but also the resource rooms of the Alchemy Palace and the Inscription Palace. This simple appearance gave people a clear feeling at a glance, and they could not help but have a good impression of it. This was the large sect they yearned for, no matter where it was orderly. I don't know if the cultivation resources of each branch hall will be different. Xia Jiqing's eyes flashed with a curious light. Although the 4 branches of Tiangang's sect all belonged to Tiangang's sect, everything was separated. Gong Xiaoqing's handsome face was filled with wisdom. The cultivation resources should not be different. They were all new disciples, and it was reasonable to say that the things they were allocated should be the same. Hearing this, Xia Jiqing nodded. It should be so. I'm just a little curious. Let's not stand here in a daze. Let's take our cultivation resources first. Dongfang Yu smiled. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were about to go to their respective resource rooms to receive resources, a familiar and joyful voice entered their ears. Boss, you're all here. After checking the information on the ID card, the elder said, New disciple. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. The elder then recorded Bailey Hongzhuang's information in his handbook. After that, he said to Bailey Hongzhuang, Go to the back and get the cultivation resources. As the elder's voice fell, a disciple behind the elder showed a respectful smile to Bailey Hongzhuang. Junior sister Bailey, please come with me to get the cultivation resources. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and followed the disciple to the back of the resource room. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also handed their identity medallions to the elder, and the elder recorded their information. Chapter 1812. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang had already received her own cultivation resources. The disciple's attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang was simply respectful to the point that it couldn't be more respectful. He was polite everywhere, as if Bailey Hongzhuang was not his junior sister, but an elder. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood that the other party was polite to her because of her relationship with Di Beichen. Now in the entire Tiangang sect, almost no one did not know the relationship between her and Di Beichen. Along the way, almost all the cultivators were respectful to her. She felt a little helpless about this situation. After all, she originally did not come to Tiangang sect with such an idea. However, thinking about it carefully, there was nothing bad about this. With this identity, there would be very few cultivators who would dare to find trouble with her, so she could cultivate in peace. During the assessment, there were countless people who found trouble with her, so it was good to be able to have some peace now. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also quickly received their cultivation resources and appeared behind Bailey Hongzhuang. "Boss, we have already received our cultivation resources, let's go back now." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Let's go out, Xiaoman and the others are still waiting for us outside." When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two walked out of the resource hall, Dongfang Yu and the other two also walked out. Yuan Xiaoman could not help but walk to Xia Jiqing's side and said with a smile, "Jiqing, let's see if our cultivation resources are the same." "Okay." Xia Jiqing chuckled and immediately compared herself with Yuan Xiaoman. Through this comparison, the two found that their cultivation resources were exactly the same, and there was no difference. "Sure enough, it's the same." Xia Jiqing sighed, and her eyes fell on Gong Shaoqing. "Shaoqing, what you said is really right." Dong Hongyun could not help but frown. "Since everyone will receive the same amount of cultivation resources, then why do we have to separate the different palaces? Isn't this superfluous? If everyone received the same amount of resources, then the resource rooms of the 4 sub-halls could be integrated together." Dongfang Yu and the others looked at each other as doubt surfaced in their eyes. They couldn't understand this either. However, since Tiangang's sect made such an arrangement, they must have their reasons. Every branch hall receives different cultivation resources, but because you are all new disciples, the cultivation resources you receive are the same. A low and magnetic voice rang out behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Di Beichen's face was filled with a handsome and sunny smile. Seeing the appearance of Di Beichen, Xia Jiqing and the others were stunned for a moment. Obviously, they didn't expect that Di Beichen would appear at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang was also a little surprised. Chapter 1813. Earlier on, he had already told Hongzhuang that she would go to the palace to look for him after she had settled everything. However, he waited in the palace for a long time and did not see Hongzhuang come. Logically speaking, the matter should have been settled by then. Then, he found out that Hongzhuang had come to the resource hall. He happened to have nothing to do in the palace, so he came to the resource hall to look for Hongzhuang. Noticing Di Beichen's slightly helpless gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. She thought that Di Beichen had not seen her return, so he specially came to look for her. "Greetings, young sect leader." Gong Shaoqing and the others bowed to Di Beichen. Before they became disciples of Tiangang's sect, Di Beichen was their friend. Now, they were already members of Tiangang's sect. When they saw Di Beichen, they naturally had to bow. Di Beichen nodded slightly and did not stop them. All the cultivators in Tiangang's sect called him that. If he stopped them, it would make things more difficult for them. Beichen, you said that the resources received by each branch hall's cultivators are different? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. She did not miss this news. Why would the cultivation resources of the 4 branch halls be different? That's right. There has always been competition between the 4 halls. Every year, there will be a competition between the 4 branch halls. The cultivation resources of each branch hall's disciples will be determined based on the results of this competition. Whichever branch hall's results are the best, they will receive the most abundant cultivation resources in the following year. Similarly, whichever branch hall's results are the worst, their disciples will receive the worst cultivation resources in the following year. You are new disciples, so the cultivation resources you receive are the same as other new disciples. After the next competition between the 4 branch palaces, your cultivation resources will be the same as the other disciples of the branch palaces. Di Beichen carefully told Bailey Hongzhuang and others about the matter. In Tiangang's sect, there was competition everywhere. After hearing Di Beichen's explanation, everyone had a look of realization. I didn't expect that the cultivation resources of the 4 branch palaces would be different. This is really surprising. Yuan Xiaoman's face was filled with amazement. It seems that in the future, when the 4 sub-palaces compete, we will have to give it our all. After all, this would affect their cultivation resources for the next year. If he was at the bottom of the 4 halls, it would not only be a humiliation, but his cultivation would also be quickly overtaken by others. This was something that no one wanted to see. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with admiration and amazement. The sects from 1,000 years ago did not have so many methods. Di Beichen's lips were filled with a confident and dazzling smile. He held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand firmly, not allowing Bailey Hongzhuang to escape. Looking at the domineering appearance of the man in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly raised a smile. She had to say that she was still happy in her heart. Bailey Hongzhuang was led by Di Beichen all the way to the direction of the palace. She said, "Beichen, starting tomorrow, I'll cultivate in the Vermilion Bird Hall. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.